Hey folks. All right, so today's video is on the power of silence. What does it actually mean in relation to a Hermetic practicer? Now, when we're talking about silence in regards to your development, it's really important to keep your personal achievements to yourself. In that there's no need to reinforce any aspect of your ego, because talking about, oh, I can do this, I can do that, it creates a stickiness in your sense of self, and that stickiness in your sense of self becomes very, very problematic. And the reason is that the Hermetic abilities have a certain degree of equanimity which is required for the ability to work. You need equanimity in eye consciousness, or a big hole in your aura, for clairvoyance to function. And so if a person, let's say a person has a hole in their aura and their eye consciousness functions through it, they have clairvoyant ability, and then they brag about their ability, this will polarize their field and make them a little bit crazy. Static will result and there'll be high fluctuations. If a person developed their skill correctly through equanimity of eye consciousness, and then they brag about it, they lose equanimity of eye consciousness because the static attached to their sense of self and ego about the skill. So the skill recedes, it pulls back. So this difference in psychology, this difference in thinking is really, really important in regards to your development. So that's the first real step of silence grants power. Don't speak about your accomplishments. Now, the exception to this rule is if you're in a magic circle, and a magic circle is engaging your relationship to divinity with a group of people, and then practicing together, and then sharing methods and experiences in that sacred space of your practice. And you'll find that people are having similar experiences on an unconscious level. When you mention your experience, it rises to the consciousness and they get it. They go, I was doing that, I just wasn't fully conscious of it. And that brings things up into a manifested state. So it speeds up development when you have a sacred space. Now, one might ask, what about all these videos I'm posting about all this stuff? Well, I very rarely talk about personal experience, and even in classes, I keep it down to what's relevant to people's growth, not the leading edge of what I'm doing, not my peak experiences. It's just things that are relevant for the student. Most of the videos are really about the theory of how to practice, and that's fine. You're not breaking silence by giving the tools for people to develop themselves. So in that sense, that's fine. Now, there is a sacrifice for a teacher who talks about these things, in that there's a karmic burden for them. They're generating positive and negative merit fields in all the people who are interacting with what they are doing. And these positive and negative merit fields can be very, 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 very problematic, in that there's a lot of attachment that takes place in projections from people to a teacher, people to the individual sharing knowledge. So let's say I share a method of clairvoyance, and you develop that method of clairvoyance, and you are successful in that method, and you're thankful and you have gratitude, and you reflect that back at me and you send praise at me. Now, I did my job well, you achieved the goal, you trained hard, and there's a circuit that takes place, and that circuit projects an unconscious merit back to me that can actually be a burden. It can actually be a attachment on the unconscious that reduces my skill because there's more static there. And even though the merit's positive, in relation to the equanimity of the skill I taught someone in relation to myself, it can reflect negatively in that my skill is reduced due to this excess static, even though it's good and it makes my life more easier because teachers who share high quality knowledge with people and make the world grow in some way have a positive merit field, and that merit field allows them to grow more easily and synchronize more easily. It still does cap or limit high level skills. So you've got to manage these merit fields and actually transform the merit up into pure light yourself. So when I teach a group of people and I give everyone a method, and I do the 3 transformations to the method to raise the method up to their higher mind, the light body in resonance with divinity, and I bring the teaching back down through the unconscious, through the layers, and I loop it a few times. Any merit that I get from doing that, I want it to reflect in the light bodies, not in the astral realm. So I manage merit in that way, that I transform it up so it doesn't become a hindrance for me. But that's a skill you figure out through practice, and it's a thing that becomes sensible as you begin to experience it. Because I've taught thousands of people, this merit field, this loop between you and the people you teach, it's a tangible substance, it's a tangible force. Okay, now as you move forward with your practice, you're going to find you're going to share with people. It's natural. You get benefit from someone, and someone has a need for the information you have. It's natural for you to share it in your path of service to help others. You pay it forward. And this paying it forward, if you're staying purely within the silence of personal experience, but voicing method, the how to practice, that's the safest place to move from. That's the safest place to stay within silence grounds power. Now, the next layer of silence grounds power is you want to minimize conflict. You want to minimize offending people. Doing this stuff, people who are ignorant, that don't have experiences in resonance, your experiences, are going to be critical. That's normal. And the more criticism you attract, the more negative energy accumulates as a projection towards you, and you also have to manage that. Because psychics are just more sensitive to that type of thing than worldly people. Worldly people have a thick skin, they're immune to it. If you're psychic, you feel energy coming and going in your environment. And you're not trying to protect yourself or close yourself off, make yourself less sensitive to your environment. Spiritually, you're making yourself more sensitive to an environment. So this type of difference in thinking, in the long term, it actually matters. You really want to take those things into consideration. Now, the next thing to look at in regards to silence is the subtle layers of static that you have in your field of consciousness. When you're doing a lot of jhanic work or samadhi type work, where you're in deep meditation, everything goes into equanimity and stillness, and you experience a deep silence. And that deep silence is your connection to God. It's your connection to divinity. When the static becomes too strong, then the connection to divinity recedes. When the silence is deep, your connection to divinity increases. And then when you through silence, you surrender to universal consciousness, to divine light, then that unification process, you become very aware that your degree of silence is a deep reflection of your degree of connection. For instance, if a person interacts with universal consciousness in a silent, true way, they know that if they talk about how they did it, their experience, their method, the occasion, the event, that they're overlaying astral static on it, and in all probability, they're going to lose their connection, or their connection to start with was a hallucination, not real, because there's a deep sense of yearning to go back into the silence to re-engage divinity. So your inner knowing that you need to be quiet about that experience and make this experience sacred means you'll never talk openly about it. You'll keep it to yourself because you don't want to lose it. And that sensitivity to losing it gets stronger and stronger the more silent the interaction with divinity is. So when you engage the silence, your enemy is static, and talking about it generates static around it and makes it more difficult to access. And you know it in the depths of your heart. So through silence, you enter the highest. And this inner knowing about that process really, really sets home that, okay, I've got to be very, very sensitive to how I communicate this to other people. So people who have the How I Met God story, that's hallucination. It's not true. They most probably took a drug and hallucinated. Drugs cannot generate silence. They generate static. They separate the matrices and pop you out of the body, but what most people will experience is a creation of their own mind. It's their own unconscious stuff reorganizing itself into an experience for them. It very rarely is a full separation. For instance, if a person takes a drug, opens a book next to them on the bed, and then leaves their body, can they read that book perfectly and clearly? No, they can't. All they experience is a creation of their own mind, because that's what drugs do. They make people hallucinate. So any drug-induced I met God story was hallucination. It's not actually real. So this is very interesting in that when a person meets God through a drug and they have a hallucination of what divinity is, and then they go tell everyone the story, it reinforces an astral belief and a false faith in their hallucination. And this becomes a delusion for the rest of their life. They cling to it, they talk about it, but do they ever re-access it? No, of course not. It's a one-off hallucination. True union with divinity can only happen through an absence of static, through deep silence. So how do you cultivate that? By simply paying attention to the stillness. When there's static in your mind, there's static and there's spaces in your mind with no static that are empty. And now you pay attention to the empty space and the static goes into the background, dissolves, switches off, or you move through it into the emptiness. And you leave those layers of your body where they are. For instance, my body, my nervous system shot. I have a tick in my shoulder. There's all types of spinal problems. And I have to move my mind through the cracks into the stillness to escape the body, to escape my astral sense of self, to escape the static of my mind through the Akashic trance, and then go into a space large enough to step outside of all that to engage the stillness. And those are the challenges that have been given to me for my practice. And as such, I embrace them and I work through it. Now, each person is going to have different challenges. What are your challenges? What type of situation do you have to move through? Now, the platform of measurement is how is your concentration? If you've got the concentration of a goldfish, fix it. Improve your concentration. You should be able to stop any thought in your mind, concentrate on it, hold it to the point in which vacuity forms around it, and you move through the vacuity into Akashic trance. And this is a foundation skill, and you should do it through every gate of your mind. Do it through visual, do it through auditory, do it through feeling, do it through taste, do it through scent. Incense is great, essential oils are great for scent. Taste, one of my favorites is orange peel. You wash an orange, you take the peel, and you squeeze the juice of the peel so that it gives you that really bitter, strong taste into your mouth. And take it into your scent as well, into your nose and your mouth. Squeeze that in, and it's kind of almost an awful taste for some people. But that orange peel, when it hits your taste buds, it traps them, and you have no choice but to concentrate on that taste. And it locks you into a type of emotional engagement. The three bodies contract onto the taste. And from there, you do three transformations on that contraction. You slowly slow everything down, open everything up, but it's held you there to start with. It contained your consciousness. And then as you concentrate and focus on that and do the 3 transformations, releasing time and space, you reopen everything up through that. And then you find yourself, because that peel came from the fruit, came from the tree, you will often see the tree it came from, where it came from, the environment around it, and have experiences like you're practicing psychometry on that pathway of how that orange peel arrived to you, from where it was grown, the seed, the environment. And all those things are in the background. Now you have a choice of tracking them, or no, you're just going to release and stay on the equanimity and the release through that concentration exercise. If you track them, yes, you can expand your sensitivity in your psychometry skill, but there's also distraction to concentration. So choose the objective of the exercise and stay on the objective. If you do the exercise with the objective of practicing psychometry, do that. If you do the exercise for the objective of practicing concentration, do that. And always lead to the stillness underlying the exercise. That silence is your door to divinity. It's your door to creation. So every exercise has the stillness, emptiness underneath. When you finish the exercise and you observe how much static is neutralized in your field of consciousness, in your astral and your physical, that's the treasure. That's what you want to harvest. You want to harvest that stillness and remember it well, and create a better platform of stillness in that field underneath your body, underneath your astral experience, underneath your mental experience, underneath the fabric of spirit. Underneath all that is divinity. And we want to create as many doors to divinity as we can by creating silence and stillness through each of the gates of the mind. And by doing this, you'll find that all the other exercises get easier. Many years ago, I invoked Furo Myo and asked him to teach me a system for initiation. And everything was based on the 6 gates. So they're all concentration exercises on the 6 gates, through observing, through one-pointedness, through emptiness, through energy control, through each gate, and how to regulate energy, amplify energy, release energy, move energy, using sacred geometry patterns through every gate, and recognizing sacred geometry patterns and amplifying sacred geometry patterns through the gates. And this skill can only be practiced in nature. You've got to put yourself in a natural environment where the forests and the mountains have far more energy than you, and observe the phenomena through the 6 gates practices. And what the byproduct of that was an incredible stillness. That the underlying benefit of every exercise was to become more equanimous, to release yourself into universal mind. So the benefits were the Dainichi Norai, the Mahavairakana Buddha, the Buddha of the universal mind, became closer and closer through every exercise. And you want to have a sense of that silence bringing you closer to God, that the conscience starts to speak more. And your silence grants power. You'll notice that if you share knowledge, it's at the expense of that silence, and you have to manage that well. Okay, so I hope this answers the question on silence grants power and sharing. I suggest you share it in as least a controversial way as possible. And I suggest you share in a way that is as theoretically sound as possible, and minimize any personal experience, to a little bit at a time, and see how you go with your practice. And you can measure the positive and negatives in your skills as you share. Okay, thanks for your time, and see everyone on the next video.